Tonight, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris make their last appeals to voters in critical battleground states. Good evening, Charlotte Hamlyn with ABC News. The race to rescue survivors after catastrophic floods in Spain claim more than 150 lives. Bringing in the big guns, Liberal heavyweights head west to boost the party's election chances. And AFL player Joel Smith suspended for 4 years under anti-doping rules. With just 5 days to go before the US presidential election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been campaigning in the western battleground states of Nevada and Arizona. The issue of gender was once again front and centre as the candidates attempted to woo undecided and potentially crucial Latino voters. North America correspondent Carrington Clark reports from Las Vegas.
Swinging through the Sunbelt, New Mexico and the key swing states of Nevada and Arizona.
Hispanics love Trump.
Desert districts and prized votes ahead of next week's election.
I believe in the power of Latinos.
The Vice President appearing alongside one of the most famous Puerto Ricans.
It wasn't just Puerto Ricans that were offended that day. Okay? It was every Latino in this country. It was humanity.
Capitalising on the fallout from offensive comments made at a Trump rally earlier this week. Donald Trump also trying to shore up support among Latinos.
Nobody loves our Latino community and our Puerto Rican community more than I do.
The Vice President seizing on fresh comments by Trump about protecting women, whether they like it or not.
He simply does not respect the freedom of women or the intelligence of women.
She's a very caring woman. As I said, she's not going to be a dictator.
We are going to be in deep trouble if Kamala Harris wins.
Both candidates will spend a few remaining days of this campaign moving from swing state to swing state, trying to woo undecided voters and to motivate their supporters to head to the polls. Private jets and fancy events like this, though, don't come cheap. And on that front, one side has a definite advantage. The Republicans have raised about $1.5 billion, while the Democrats have raised more than $2.2 billion.
And some of the Democratic cash has been deployed in the middle of Vegas. But Trump also has some deep-pocketed friends.
Elon, that's a great one. He feels it's so important.
His billionaire backers' campaign tactics have found their way into a Philadelphia courtroom, where a district attorney is trying to stop his $1 million handouts to voters who register with his super PAC.
Elon Musk didn't show. We are going to handle this case and continue to handle this case.
With 5 days to go, there's likely plenty of oscillations left in this race. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Las Vegas.
More than 1,000 rescue workers have been deployed to the worst-hit areas of Spain following catastrophic floods that have killed about 160 people. The Prime Minister is warning residents the danger of further flooding hasn't passed.
Residents trudge through debris, searching for belongings and any sign of their loved ones. The task is monumental. Rescuers believe there are still bodies trapped in these cars, unable to get out before the deluge came through.
The firefighters took the elderly first, when they could get in. I'm from nearby, so I tried to help and rescue people. People were crying all over. They were trapped.
The mammoth floodwaters tore down bridges and tossed cars across highways and crucial rail lines. Train services aren't expected to resume for weeks. A daunting cleanup is underway, but getting in desperately needed supplies and help isn't easy. Many areas are only accessible from the air. Frustration and desperation is growing.
We are not thieves, but we have to eat. What can I give to the child if we don't have electricity?
No one in this area can contact each other because we have no internet. There's about more than 150,000 people that have just been displaced.
Locals and those who have made it to the disaster zone are doing what they can, but with everything coated in a thick layer of mud, even walking is difficult. Spain's Prime Minister has warned the dangerous weather may not be finished. More heavy rain is expected in some of the worst hit areas.
Que no salgan, que se queden en casa.
Do not go out, stay at home, because right now the most important thing is to safeguard as many lives as possible.
Farmers among those hurting. This disaster will have enduring consequences for the region, which is a global exporter of oranges. But for now, the focus is on finding those still missing as floodwaters recede. Michelle Rimmer, ABC News.
There's a growing optimism among Liberals that they can win back federal seats in Western Australia at the next election as a key step to regaining government. Former Prime Ministers John Howard and Tony Abbott have joined opposition leader Peter Dutton in travelling west to add heavyweight support to both their federal and state teams.
Heralding the new guard with a touch of the old.
Nice day. Typical Western Australian weather, isn't it?
Welcome to Bullwinkle.
Thank you. Hi, hello.
A standing ovation in the new seat of Bullwinkle for Australia's second longest serving Prime Minister.
I'm here, of course, to try and influence the Australians who live here to vote for Matt. Matt is a genuine local.
Liberal candidate Matt Moran needs to beat not only the Labor candidate, but also former State Nationals leader Mia Davies in the critical seat.
Because as Mr Dutton said, if we don't win Bullwinkle, we don't win government.
From the Perth Hills to the start of the wheat belt, the new electorate of Bullwinkle is notionally Labor. But the Liberals hope the star power of former Prime Minister John Howard will lift the profile of their candidate, Matt Moran, and help get him over the line.
Well, John Howard was Prime Minister a long time ago. I don't think if he's the answer for the Liberals when it comes to any election outcome, they're asking the wrong question.
The Liberals aiming to win back the 4 WA federal seats they lost in 2022.
The odds are against it, but gee, they're changing. They're changing almost on a daily basis.
An even tougher challenge for the Liberals at the state level, after being almost wiped out at the last WA election.
It is climbing Mount Everest to try and win back, but it can be done.
We absolutely can win it. We're focused on the right priorities.
Banking on the tide turning, just as it did for the Liberals in the recent Queensland election.
The public will punish a bad government. They did it in Queensland. I think they'll do it at the federal election as well.
Unlikely to be the last time Liberal heavyweights hit the campaign trail in WA. Nick Perpich, ABC News.
A judge has ruled One Nation leader Pauline Hanson breached racial discrimination laws in a tweet to fellow Senator Mehreen Faruqi. She used a variation of a racist slogan, telling the Deputy Greens leader to go back to Pakistan.
It was a case with complex issues, but Mehreen Faruqi says the outcome sends a simple message.
And it sends a strong message to racists that they will be held accountable.
On the day of the Queen's death in 2022, Senator Faruqi said she couldn't mourn the leader of a racist empire. Senator Hanson's reply said, in part, "It's clear you're not happy, so pack your bags and piss off back to Pakistan." The One Nation leader argued that was exempt from racial discrimination law because it was a fair comment on a matter of public interest. The federal court disagreed.
Her tweet was an angry personal attack on Senator Faruqi, with no discernible content or comment about the issues raised by Senator Faruqi's tweet.
The court found that while Muslims as a group may not be protected under the Act, the senator's identity as a person of colour, an immigrant and a Muslim were inseparable.
Today is a win of every single person who has been told to go back to where they came from.
The expert evidence establishes that that is a racist trope with a long history.
The judge has ordered Pauline Hanson to delete the tweet and pay Senator Faruqi's costs, which are likely to run into the hundreds of thousands. But as for an apology, Senator Faruqi says she's not expecting anything. She wasn't in court to hear the decision, but Senator Hanson was back on Twitter expressing deep disappointment. The outcome demonstrates the inappropriately broad application of Section 18C, particularly insofar as it impinges upon freedom of political expression. The One Nation leader has already flagged an appeal. Jamie McKinnell, ABC News, Sydney.
Australia's Passport Office is under scrutiny after a damning audit revealed more than a dozen officials and contractors are being investigated for possible misconduct. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts.
The Passport Office produces the document which every single Australian relies on whenever we go overseas. The office came under pressure last year over lengthy delays in processing passports, and now its contracts to produce those passports, worth around $1.5 billion, have come under the auditor's microscope. The audit assessment is brutal. Few of those contracts were opened up to proper competition, and in at least 16 instances, officials failed to declare conflicts of interest. And 18 people, including current officials, former officials and contractors, are now being investigated by the department. That's not all. Auditors also examined 2 work trips which officials took to the Queensland resort town of Port Douglas, which they were scoping out for a major conference at a cost to taxpayers of more than $30,000. After booking a local resort, the officials decided they'd actually hold the conference in Canberra instead, which meant they had to fork out another $104,000 in cancellation fees. The government is unimpressed. It says things have improved at the Passport Office over the last 18 months, but it's still looking into exactly what happened and whether it might need to take further action.
A man has died in a crash on the Kwinana freeway in Perth's southern suburbs. Police say a truck rolled on the freeway about 500 metres south of Rowley Road in Wandie. The 39-year-old driver died at the scene. Police are urging anyone with information to contact Crime Stoppers. The crash caused delays in traffic as well as disrupting the Mandurah train line, forcing the use of bus replacements. The Premier, Roger Cook, says the state government is open to the possibility of permanently changing the date of WA Day. The public holiday is usually held on the first Monday in June, but this year it was cancelled due to bad weather. It's been rescheduled to the 24th of November and will feature live music from a number of WA performers. Mr Cook says there have been discussions about possible changes to the state's holiday calendar.
I think one of the things we've tolerated for too long in Australia is, different states having a different program of long weekends.
Australian boxer Jason Tonkin is in a coma after he was found in a Thai hotel room alongside the body of fellow boxer Briton Joshua Goldstone. The former Sydney-sider moved to Thailand as a teenager and is a renowned middleweight Muay Thai fighter. The two were found by hotel staff in the resort city of Pattaya, with 27-year-old Tonkin in a state of intoxication and panic and 21-year-old Goldstone deceased. Tonkin had recently opened up about his problems with substance abuse. 6 Australian women have accused the former Harrods boss of sexual assault in what's been described as the worst case of corporate sexual abuse the world has ever seen. Lawyers have now officially launched legal action against the famous London department store after more than 400 people came forward with harrowing allegations.
These are some of the hundreds of women who say they were sexually abused by Mohammed Al-Fayed.
In many ways, it's the worst case of corporate sexual abuse of women that the world has ever known.
Among the 420 people who've come forward, Australians who landed jobs at Harrods in their 20s.
Because when they were youngsters, they travelled and they came to London and they got a job at Harrods, and it was the most wonderful thing that they've ever had. A lot of them, after they'd been, subjected to this horrific ordeal, fled.
The shocking allegations stretch into sport. Footballers at the Fulham club Al Fayed owned for 16 years say they were sexually harassed by the billionaire.
I know that by speaking out, we are making it harder for this kind of behaviour to be tolerated anywhere.
Al Fayed, who died last year at the age of 94, owned Harrods between 1985 and 2010. Legal proceedings have now been officially launched against the department store. Lawyers told the ABC they're investigating abuse claims against children as young as 11.
He's a vile monster. Is there any other way to describe him?
While Mohammed Al Fayed will never face justice himself, lawyers for the survivors say this legal action isn't about revenge, but accountability.
It means setting a precedent so that in the future, young girls don't go through the same thing.
Harrods' new owners are in the process of setting up a compensation scheme for survivors. Bridget Rollison, ABC News, London.
In the Middle East, authorities say 6 doctors have been killed in Israeli strikes across southern Lebanon. Evacuation orders have been issued in the east of Lebanon for a second day in a row, and strikes have been reported in the coastal city of Tyre. On the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Red Crescent released this video after 4 people were killed trying to access food aid. Taiwan has been hit by its strongest typhoon in almost 30 years, killing at least 2 people and injuring hundreds of others. Nearly 500,000 households lost power when the typhoon, the equivalent of a Category 4 tropical cyclone, brought gusts of more than 250 kilometres an hour. It was touch and go for this passenger plane, which eventually landed safely. Hundreds of flights had to be cancelled. Schools and businesses have begun the clean-up today. There's a mismatch in Australia's housing market, with about 12 million bedrooms sitting empty at the same time as countless Australians are looking for somewhere to live. But it's not as simple as moving people into the right-sized homes, because in many cases, there aren't any.
WA's population is growing by roughly 1 person every 6 minutes. But there's not enough homes. And with Perth already one of the world's longest cities, it can't keep growing out. It needs to grow up.
Accelerating the delivery of infill, medium and high density apartments.
But buying an apartment off the plan comes with risks. Audrey Taylor learnt the hard way.
It's just stressful and it's always in the back of my mind.
You can live the lifestyle. 3 years ago, the 22-year-old nurse put down an $18,000 deposit for an apartment at this site in the Perth suburb of Inglewood.
This was meant to be built, I believe, over 2 years ago now. It's hard to kind of keep track.
Builder Niche Living has unfinished homes all over the city. It recently relinquished its building registration in a deal brokered by the WA government, allowing customers to access up to $200,000 in home indemnity insurance.
Bringing to a close the period of limbo customers have been in.
But apartments over 3 stories aren't covered.
I don't feel like there's any reason why, as an apartment buyer, that I don't get that same right as them.
If you're buying a house on land or a townhouse, you're protected. If you're buying an apartment, you're not.
Niche Living's director is allowed to remain as the developer of the Inglewood apartments, but will need to find a new builder to finish the project, a process Audrey has been told is underway.
I just don't know how much I believe them, because they've told me in the past that there were updates that didn't end up happening, so I still don't want to plan anything and get my hopes up.
The WA government last year announced plans to crack down on apartment builders, including by introducing mandatory inspections during critical points of construction. But that won't start until 2026.
The state government has a responsibility to look after the apartment owners, especially as they are championing that infill housing choice.
Commerce Minister Sue Ellery, welcome to Stateline WA.
Thank you.
What more can be done to improve consumer protection for apartment buyers?
Yeah, so I saw obviously Audrey's distress, and I can understand that.
building a new home is a major life event at the best of times, and doing it in these times is magnified that level of stress. I think it's important to understand the difference between the contractual arrangements and the financial arrangements that apply when you build a single residential home versus apartments. So with a single residential home, the contract you sign commits you to make progress payments throughout the life of the build, and there is no finite end point of when that building must be complete. For apartment builders, it's a different contract and different financial arrangement. So the contract that you sign has you pay a upfront deposit that's held in trust for you. And we know in respect of Sky and the niche apartments, that is held in trust. We've checked. And then there is a finite end to that contract. The other difference is there is no provider of insurance for apartments 4 stories and above.
Does that need to change?
There's no provider anywhere in Australia, none. So it really is a market failure. We do know there is a pilot project in New South Wales and Building and Energy, part of the Commerce portfolio, are watching that very closely to see if that's something that we might be able to apply in Western Australia.
You announced building reforms last year meant to crack down on apartment builders. Would any of those changes have improved the situation with this niche apartment?
So what we're hoping part of what they will achieve is to build confidence of consumers. So much tighter rules for the Building Commissioner, much greater powers for the Building Commissioner, much greater fines, mandated inspections at about 9 different points during the build of an apartment. And frankly, we're hopeful that that might give the insurance industry a reason to get back into the market.
So why wait until 2026 when we know these issues are happening now?
So there's really 2 reasons. In the first instance, the construction industry has been through so much that if we were to impose the mandatory inspections immediately, we don't have the workforce to do it. It just does not exist to do it. The leap in costs that would then be passed on to consumers would also be significant as well. So as with all of the changes that we've made in Western Australia to building changes, we've done it in a very incremental way. Now that's quite deliberate. I understand the frustration for people who are in the market now, but it is deliberately designed so that we can actually deliver what we're promising. There's no point us announcing we're going to do this tomorrow if we don't have enough building surveyors to do it, and right now we don't.
But between now and 2026, why would anyone have confidence of buying an off-the-plan apartment?
I think there's a couple of things to take into account. Firstly, the very different financial arrangement that I explained already. So they're not making those payments throughout the life and getting that double whammy of a financial burden. That's important. The second thing is, in Western Australia, we really haven't seen the kind of, frankly, catastrophic structural defects that we saw on the East Coast.
But we shouldn't have to wait for that to act, right?
And we're not. We have already announced that we're making those changes and we're doing it in a considered way. We want to build confidence in the industry, but we also know the market of builders in Western Australia, they're mainly West Australian builders, and most of them conduct themselves in a way that ensures they get ongoing business. Now, that's not to say someone experiencing delays now is not legitimately frustrated about that. I can understand that completely. But we need to do this in a way where the actual industry can deliver it, and we're not peaking costs and putting housing, which is already expensive for people, beyond the realms by increasing costs because we've made so many changes so quickly.
Minister Sue Ellery, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Property prices are still going up, but the pace is starting to slow. Buyers are being held back by how much they can borrow. At the same time, more homes are being listed for sale.
Selling season is heating up in the nation's second most expensive city.
It's lovely to meet you.
No worries. Thanks for the time.
My pleasure.
This real estate agent in Brisbane just sold a 2-bedroom unit $60,000 above the reserve. She's now gearing up to auction another in the same complex.
This is our second open home, and so far we've had 16 groups through, and I've got lots of interested parties.
More properties are also being put up for sale.
We're seeing a bit of movement from sellers who have been investors or long-term holders, taking advantage of really great prices at the moment.
Prices continued to pick up nationally, up 0.3% in October and 6% for the year. It marked the 21st straight month of gains, but the market is cooling, with price rises easing in Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane. Values in Sydney fell for the first time since January 2023, and prices also went backwards in Melbourne, Canberra and Darwin.
This combination of high interest rates, existing poor affordability, and of course increasing numbers of people seeing mortgage stress, that's what's weighing on the property markets.
With property prices remaining high, there's little relief on the way for first home buyers. Even though inflation is still falling, economists say it isn't enough to convince the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates at its meeting next week.
We could see, after a few rate cuts, however, more buyers be confident about entering the market and housing values rising with more momentum.
A slowdown that's likely to be short-lived. Kate Ainsworth, ABC News.
To finance now, and the share market has ended its week with heavy losses, while the amount of money people are borrowing to keep up with record house prices has risen sharply over the past year. Here's David Chow.
Well, the dream of home ownership for a lot of people is looking increasingly like just a dream, especially when you look at how much prices have risen in Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth since COVID first struck. Meanwhile, Melbourne has gone from being the second most expensive city to the third cheapest. As for who's borrowing the most, it's the owner-occupiers that are upgrading to a new home. And despite the rumours, there's no sign of investors fleeing the market, considering the value of new home loans for this group of multiple property owners has jumped nearly 30% in a single year. First home buyers, though, aren't getting much of a break. As for whether boomers or younger generations had it tougher, this chart comparing the gap between median house prices and one's capacity to pay should settle the matter. Meanwhile, investors are a bit on edge with just a few days until the US election. The All Ords fell by 0.5% today, which contributed to this week's fairly steep loss of around 1%, though it did do better than most other share markets except for Hong Kong and Shanghai. Now back home, Macquarie was one of today's worst performing stocks after investors decided its $1.6 billion profit wasn't high enough. While oil prices jumped, gold and iron ore fell, and the Aussie dollar slipped to 65.7 US cents. And finally, a court in Russia has issued a record fine to Google for blocking pro-Russian channels on YouTube. It's after 20 decillion US dollars from the tech giant. And that works out to be 20 billion trillion bucks, which is more money than there is in the entire world. And that's finance.
Hobart's popular Dark Mofo Winter Arts Festival will be staged in full again next year. Only limited Dark Mofo events were put on this year, with the organisers citing rising costs. But the full program of events, including Night Mass, will return in 2025. The Tasmanian government is investing $22 million in the event.
Costs have skyrocketed increasingly high over the last few years, and that is what really prompted the festival to have to take that year off to look and find the ways we could reduce those costs while still maintaining our quality.
To sport, and Melbourne footballer Joel Smith has been banned for 4 years following a doping investigation. The 28-year-old tested positive to cocaine after a game in 2023. Sport Integrity Australia later found he used text messages to offer cocaine to teammates. That's considered trafficking or attempted trafficking under the AFL's anti-doping policy. Melbourne football boss Alan Richardson said the club respects the decision and will continue to educate the players about their responsibilities. In the NRL, the Bulldogs have sacked star winger Josh Addo-Carr over a failed roadside drug test. The 29-year-old returned a positive reading after being pulled over by police in September, and a second sample produced the same result, prompting Canterbury to sideline him for the NRL finals. Addo-Carr has maintained he had not knowingly ingested cocaine, but the Bulldogs board chose to terminate his contract with 1 year remaining, citing his lack of transparency about the incident. Western Australia's Jai Richardson says he hopes to return to Sheffield Shield duties before Christmas as he recovers from his latest injury setback. Richardson, who's played 3 Test matches for Australia, has battled injury over the past few seasons. He recently returned to one-day cricket for WA and will play a second 11 game next week to increase his workload. Richardson says it's been a slow build-up to full fitness.
It's been a little bit frustrating, but the communication was that, you know, I probably would feel ready to go, but then have this slower process, which is fine, and I'm comfortable with that at the moment.
Racing, fashion and flowers will take over Flemington this week for another Melbourne Cup extravaganza. Derby Day opens the carnival tomorrow.
For the racing purist, it's like Christmas, and this is the star on top. The final piece is in place.
The world is going to be watching us over the next week.
Months in the making, Flemington is blooming.
I was really nervous back in August. There's 16,500 roses, and we started pruning in April, and we hadn't finished in August. Good old Melbourne's helped me out and cooled down this week, so just slowed everything down, so everything could be pretty good.
On the cusp of another sellout Saturday, and the forecast is just as exciting.
Sunny, top at 26 degrees, so that'll enable us to prepare the surface that we want and the surface that all the horses and riders appreciate.
The stage is all set for tomorrow's $2 million race. Star colt El Costello enters as the favourite, trained by Anthony Cummings, who's chasing his 5th win in a row.
Derbies anywhere are hard to win, and they're cherished by those that do. Certainly, this won't be any different.
El Costello is out to become the first horse since Ace High in 2017 to complete the Champion Stakes Victoria Derby double, but will need to do it from the widest barrier.
The favourite has drawn the car park, and that horse needs a lot of luck.
Winning the past 2 derbies, champion trainer Chris Waller won't feature in the main event this year, instead eyeing the other 2 Group 1 races.
Cup week is when it all counts, and hopefully we can win another race or 2.
Empty today, but organisers anticipate 260,000 people will attend the 4 main race days. Alexia Pesce, ABC News.
Time now for the weather with Tabarak Jrood, and today marks the beginning of cyclone season.
Yes, that's right, Charlotte. The season runs from November through to April, but while there has been a clear decline in cyclone numbers during recent decades, warmer than normal ocean temperatures could lead to the most active season in years. The Bureau is predicting 11 named storms in the Australian region this year, with around 4 making landfall. In WA, we could see 5 cyclones form off the Pilbara and Kimberley region, but we aren't expecting to see any cyclone activity soon though. Turning to Perth today, we had fine and sunny conditions, reaching a top of 29.5 degrees just before noon after an overnight low of 15. And it was a mild night across the southern half. Wandering was the coldest spot again, dropping to 7 degrees, while it was a much warmer night for the northern regions, and another very hot day as well. Marble Bar reached a sweltering 45 degrees, and that heat extended into inland parts. Over in the wheat belt, Southern Cross reached an October record of 41.7 degrees, while along the coast, Esperance and Hopetoun got to a very warm 39. On the satellite, there's some wispy cloud brushing the southern part of the state due to a weak cold front that's approaching the southwest. The northern end of that front is set to pass through the region early tomorrow, and as it moves east, it will help push that heat from the state's inland parts into South Australia, cooling things back home. That system will then be followed by a new high-pressure ridge which will strengthen across the west coast. Taking a look around the country tomorrow, Adelaide is set to reach a warm 35 degrees, mostly sunny and 26 in Melbourne, a possible shower for Sydney and Brisbane, and partly cloudy over in Canberra. Back in WA, and it's staying hot and sunny across the north tomorrow, 43 degrees at Telfer, 45 again in Marble Bar, but there is the chance of showers and thunderstorms over the Kimberley and adjacent north interior. Meanwhile, the heat will be easing over central parts with partly cloudy conditions forecast. Still some tops in the high 30s for parts of the Goldfields, but temperatures ranging from the high 20s to mid 30s over in the central west and the wheat belt. And it's also cooling down across the southern half. Some towns dropping more than 15 degrees from today, 22 degrees in Esperance, 18 in Albany and Walpole. And the cold front could also bring some showers southwest of the line from Geraldton to Israelite Bay. In Perth tomorrow, we could also get a light burst of showers with up to 2 millimetres expected, and we're heading for a cooler top of 23 degrees from an overnight low of 16. Winds on local waters will be turning south to southwesterly, 15 to 20 knots during the morning, with seas around 1 metre. The sun will rise at 18 past 5, setting at 6:43. And then looking ahead, the milder conditions are continuing, partly cloudy and 23 from Sunday through to Tuesday, where we could see a shower or two before the sunshine returns later in the week, Charlotte.
Thank you very much for that, Tabarak. And that is ABC News for this Friday. You can stay up to date with ABC News online or watch the latest anytime on ABC iView. Thanks for your company. Hope to catch you over the weekend. Enjoy the rest of your evening.